What's up, you guys? Dr. Jeff, Chief Medical Officer at Rythmia Life Advancement Center. Today I want to talk about something called healthy strategy. And, because all of us are sort of removed to some degree from our normal day-to-day because of this pandemic, it's given us a lot of opportunities to check in with ourselves and see, what's going on individually with myself. And I think what's really cool about that, and also very difficult about that, is that you really get a chance to look at you. And what keeps popping up for me in these times is I think about all you guys and all the people that are getting, waiting to come down to Rythmia, all you guys that have been to Rythmia already, and people that are hoping to come one day and preparing. What pops into my mind during this time is that those that have any sort of addiction are really struggling right now. And there's exceptions because sometimes people just stocked up on alcohol and they're just drinking themselves to oblivion. So they're not struggling with their addiction. But generally speaking, if people have an addiction, right now is a rough time for them. So what I want to talk about, and I like to talk about this subject quite frequently, is how to deal with addiction and what it means to everybody. Because a lot of people don't really get it. And the healthcare industry often doesn't get it. And there's been historically sort of one approach to addiction, which is a valid approach for a lot of people. But there's a lot of different ways to approach addiction, to look at how can I overcome a craving or a substance abuse issue or a behavioral addiction, which is also very interesting because a lot of clinicians don't understand or even talk about behavioral addictions. We're focused more on drugs and alcohol. So what I want to talk about right now is a couple things about addiction and how plant medicine can help, but also how you can prepare to come to Rythmia to get the addiction knocked out, but to get it handled before you arrive. And I'm going to give you some pointers. So the way I like to look at addiction is there's two sort of situations going on with somebody that's addicted. Number one is that they are chemically dependent on something. Now, if you have a behavioral addiction, such as an eating addiction, a sexual addiction, a gambling addiction, a shopping addiction, that is still a chemical dependent neurochemical response. Because what's happening when you're doing those behaviors that are addicting is you're getting a rush or a surge neurochemically that's exciting and that's numbing, and that it has that whole rush going on. And that's often related to serotonin and dopamine. So I'm going to talk about the behavioral addictions a little bit later in this discussion, but first and foremost, for substances, drugs, alcohol, people that are addicted to that, there's a neurochemical response, often serotonin and often dopamine and other neurochemicals that are being surged and depleted and surged and depleted. And when that occurs, the substance becomes necessary to actually just survive and actually just kind of have a normal sort of day-to-day feeling. Obviously, people that are addicted aren't doing so well behaviorally necessarily, but even to get out of bed, sometimes a substance is needed. So that's where it's really gone bad. So there's a neurochemical, sort of chemical substance-related component to addiction. Also, there's a behavioral component to addiction. There's habits, there's triggers, there's underlying causes, there's trauma, there's relationship issues, there's self-esteem issues, there's all these issues. There's all these things, and there's coping skills or lack of coping skills, and there's all this stuff happening that's very, very, very difficult for somebody to deal with their life. And so they rely on drugs and alcohol or a behavior to kind of get through. So what happens when somebody realizes, okay, you know what, I'm an addict, a so-called addict, I need treatment, or something's wrong, I got to see a doctor, I got to go inpatient, or I got something, right? What happens is they usually get one of those two schools of thought working on them. So sometimes people look at just the behaviors, clinicians do. They say, all right, change your friends, get a new job, get a new whatever, move, change, let's work on some cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to do some different behavioral strategies, all this stuff, right? So that's one approach that clinicians will take with a person who has an addiction. And then another approach is the sort of biomedical approach and the psychiatric approach, which is meds and also detox and also getting people medically safe and off of the meds or off of the drugs and tapering them and using all kinds of stuff. And if they have an opiate addiction, oftentimes putting them on Suboxone, which also causes addiction to Suboxone. And it just, the whole thing sucks, it just sucks. So then what happens is each school of thought misses the other school of thought's sort of interventions or sort of expertise. And so if I'm just working on only my triggers and my behaviors, well, guess what? I have a neurochemical imbalance that is eating at me and is pushing me to try to get drugs in my hand and try to get just that next drink that's overwhelming. And it's just so hard. I'm trying to like push through with like staying focused on meetings or healthy behavior or trying to do whatever behaviorally, but there's this neurochemical pull, like a huge magnet that's pulling on me, and I relapse. And then that happens again and again and again. I get discouraged. And next thing you know, I'm hopeless. Next thing you know, I'm suicidal. Next thing you know, I throw in the towel and just binge for, months at a time. And I piss off everybody. And my family gets mad at me and everybody rejects me and I burn so many bridges and I don't know what to do. And I feel helpless and lost again. And then there's the people that get the medical side handled and they taper and they get off their meds or their drugs or whatever. They go with a medical detox or an inpatient rehab or whatever, and they do it safely, medically. They don't have those neurochemical, as big of a pull neurochemically to use because they got it handled, health-wise. Then they go home or they go back to their same environment, and guess what's there? All the behaviors, all the triggers, all the things that were helping them, feel that they needed these drugs or alcohol. All the environmental things are the same, and they get overwhelmed and then they relapse. So either way, if you approach it with just one of those ways, you're not going to make it typically. Now, some people can, some people have. I know plenty that have made it by doing one of those. But if you're going to play the odds and you're going to play the numbers game, you got to attack both. Okay, so how do you attack both? How do you attack the brain chemistry? And how do you attack the behavioral sort of underlying causes of trauma and behaviors and self-esteem? And how do you deal with both at the same time? Well, you can go to 90 days inpatient somewhere. Then you can do a year and a half outpatient. You can live in group homes and sober livings, and you can be in treatment for 5 years. You can do that. That's one way. I don't know a lot of people that have the ability to do that. I just don't know many people. There are people that can. I don't know many that can do that. Or you can prepare as best you can to come to Rythmia and get both of those things knocked out in a week. Now, let me say this with a grain of salt. Clearly, there's work that needs to be done after you get home. Duh. Okay, I'm not stupid. Okay, I'm not going to say something ridiculous. Obviously, if you have a lifetime of addiction and you clean up yourself enough to come to Rythmia, you come and you knock it out in a week, you have this self-realization and you balance your neurochemistry, then you just go home and you just live your life as everything's fine. Well, guess what? You got to still work on it, okay? You got to still take what you learned during the plant medicine and you got to implement it in your life. You have to implement what you learned. So let me back up just a little bit. Okay, so the reason why I love plant medicine so much, for not only addiction, but I love it for trauma. I love it for health issues. I love it for self-identity issues. I also believe in the philosophy of what we're teaching, which is it is everyone's goal in life to remerge with their soul. That's the goal. And you can do it a lot of different ways. We've found a way that is very effective, that's very helpful, that involves Mother Earth, it involves nature, it involves humankind, it involves everything working together to help you be connected back to yourself and back to the earth. Okay, so that's the way we do it. There's lots of other ways to do it, but that's the way we do it. So if you come to Rythmia and you drink plant medicine, you go through our program, what's going to happen for those that have these addictions and they have a history of these addictions is that their neurochemistry is going to be rebalanced. And there's a lot of data, and there's a lot of research, scientific research that shows that is what's happening. Neurochemistry is getting reset So especially serotonin and in particular dopamine, which are very much related to addiction. So it's almost like pushing a reset button on your computer and starting fresh. That's what's happening with your brain and with addiction and with neurochemistry. So that part gets handled during the week while you're with us, is that you don't have the neurochemical cravings that you had before. Get everything rebalanced. So it's really, really cool. Then what's happening is you're having a journey, as they call it. You're having these self-awareness moments. Some people have these things called nadas, which is they don't really see much or hear much or feel much or think much. They just fall asleep during the ceremony. And that's also okay, because in the Colombian tradition, that's a blessing. And you get a lot of information unfolding for you as the weeks go on. So it's not a problem. But for those that have these moments of clarity, what's happening is that you're getting out of your own way, as I've talked about before in Facebook Lives, and you're getting to analyze yourself in almost like a third-person perspective, and you're seeing why you're doing what you're doing, and what the trauma meant, and why it's been affecting you, and how you can evolve past it and work through it. Now, a lot of people have trauma. A lot of people do. A lot of people have severe trauma. There's a whole range of trauma, from very minor, let's say, all the way up to horrific. I've dealt with the most horrific trauma I think that it's possible. Like in my career, I've dealt with a lot of trauma from when I was in LA. I was a trauma expert. A lot of trauma, I won't even get into it because it'll just ruin your day if I even talk about what these traumas were. But there's horrible, horrible trauma that is possible to work past. And the way you do it is safely. You got to do it safe. You got to do it. You got to feel secure. You got to do it feeling comfortable in yourself and with the environment you're in. You can go off into the jungle. You can do that. Lots of great things happen out there. I love the jungle. The jungle is like an amazing, beautiful place. But the jungle also has a lot of question marks. If you don't know where you're going, you don't know who the shamans are, you don't know who the people are that are going to attend, you don't know the medical care that may or may not be there, which is usually not there. You don't know how far away you are from stuff. You're a Westerner traveling into an indigenous community. The indigenous people are amazingly beautiful and very much connected to the earth, but there's a lot of people that pretend to be that and or not. They're lying, and they trap you and they trick you. Okay, so there's a lot of that going on. We know places that are really good. We know places that are amazing, but we've heard of many more that are not good. And so it's what I love about Rythmia. The number one thing I love about Rythmia, aside from what we're doing there, is that we are medically licensed by the Costa Rican Ministry of Health to administer plant medicine as a medical and therapeutic, emotional, mental health remedy to people that are struggling with various issues from A to Z. We're medically licensed to do that. And some people can say, oh, well, you guys aren't honoring the medicine. Well, really, you've never been here and you don't know that? And yes, we are. I'm sorry, but we are. Okay, so we're trying to help people heal themselves. That's what we're trying to do. Bottom line, if you ask, like, what is Rythmia about? It's about empowering individuals. It's about empowering them to make their own changes for themselves and make their own life shifts. Not anybody else is going to do it for you. I'm sorry. Like, I went into a career thinking that I was somebody that was going to help people do something, and it's just not the way it is. I'm just telling you, it's not the way it is. Like, my medical background, my psychology background, my public health background, all that stuff helps set the stage for people to do the work themselves. That's what it does. It does not do the work for the people themselves. It doesn't. Unless you're going to go have a heart surgery. Then the surgeon, yes, does perform a heart surgery. And that's awesome, right? So the trauma surgery and ER stuff is real. That's where medicine's at. But if you're going to try to fix my anxiety by giving me Xanax, you're high. Okay, you should take that freaking Xanax yourself. Okay, because that's not going to fix me. That's gonna temporarily push my anxiety to the side, so I just don't feel it. It's still there. And eventually I have to deal with it. You know what's funny is that I'm staying at my sister-in-law's house, and she has just had a brand new baby, beautiful little baby, a couple weeks ago, amazing. And I have 4 kids. It reminded me, like, you can do certain things with a baby to help them sleep and help them feed and stuff that's easier for the parent, or you can do it what's best for the baby. And if you do what's easier for the parent all the time, which is, by the way, they're doing it great. But if you do what's easier for you as a parent the whole time with an infant, Eventually, you have to break them of that cycle so they can be independent and they can sleep by themselves and fall asleep by themselves and self-soothe, and you know what I mean? So you either start doing it now or you eventually got to deal with it later. So you cannot pretend it's not there. Like, you have to deal with it. So what I'm about, right, what I've learned in my career in healthcare is that let's deal with these issues now. Let's not take Xanax to deal with anxiety. Let's not take SSRIs to deal with depression. Let's not take Adderall and stuff if you feel a little unfocused. Now, I always have to say this, because there's always somebody out there that goes, he doesn't know what he's talking about because I use those things and it helps me. Okay, yes, of course. There are exceptions where those meds are very, very, very valuable to people for short periods of time and even longer periods of time, depending on their diagnosis, depending on what they're dealing with in their own life, depending on their own biochemistry, depending on their own life situation, and also their resources and what they are available to do, and also their level of success they're able to have with and without those meds. So obviously, meds can be very, very helpful. I've seen it in my own career with my own patients be very helpful. However, we know that the majority of those meds are overprescribed, and they're not needed, and they're not necessary, and they're a crutch, and they're not good for you. So let's try to eliminate those if you don't need them. And if you need them, God bless you. It's okay. You can use them. It's fine. But if you don't need them and you really are just kind of looking for something as a quick fix just to kind of get you through, but you know there's work to do and you can do it, and you have the ability, let's get the work done. Let's rip that Band-Aid off just at once instead of slowly peeling it back. Let's just like rip it off. Come down to Rythmia. We'll take care of you. We'll provide an environment of safety. You can do the work. Let's get past this pandemic. Let's have everybody focus on themselves. If you have an addiction, start to realize this and look at it. And what I'll say quickly about behavioral addictions, those are hard because behaviors are often things that we normally do in life. Shopping, sexual stuff, eating disorder, all that stuff, right? That's all healthy, normal stuff when it's done the right way. So that's why when it becomes addictive, it's extra hard. Okay, so those conditions can get resolved with the strategies I'm talking about. Balancing neurochemistry and looking at the behavioral side of why you're doing this to cope and what it's all about. Get down to Rythmia and figure this out for yourself. Become empowered. That's what we want. People that are empowered, people that are self-sufficient, people that feel good about who they are and connect with other people and have empathy and heal everybody around them, heal the world. All right, Pura Vida, thanks for watching. See you guys next Monday. Dr. Jeff. All right.